All right. Going live again. Hopefully it's good. Check on YouTube. I'm going to be editing a few things. Hopefully it's not bad. Unfortunately, it's looking very much like I'm never going to fucking go live again on that fucking app. That's a damn shame, honestly. It's a damn shame, but it's all good. Whatever, I guess. You can't really do too much. That's super discouraging. Super discouraging. We're gonna get into some topics today, and then we'll go ahead and see how. See why the fuck is it doing that? Bro, I swear this shit's pissing me the fuck off. Hopefully everything's good, fellas. We're gonna go ahead and get to the regular scheduled programming here in a second. I don't have too many topics. Handoff cannot be completed, bro. I don't know what the fuck's going on with this shit. We're gonna get into it, man. Okay. So there's a few things that I do want to talk about that have been on my mind since last live. So I'm gonna get into those hopefully here soon. Oh, damn it, I forgot to tell Anthony that shit. Fuck. Alright. So I gotta connect this idea to something else. So I'm gonna talk about this struggle because I'm amidst this struggle, and probably you watching this are amidst this struggle in some type of form or fashion. But I do want to mention it because here's the thing: I want people to understand that you're not in this alone, right? And we're all into this together. And it goes a little something like this, right? I feel like right now we're living in an interesting period of time where there's people that are my age who are not bad people, but who are living a worse life than what they probably should be living. And it's not necessarily the most in their control, right? I'm a person who understands that at the top of your value hierarchy, you must take personal responsibility for the things in which you do and and for your life, right? I'm not a victim when it comes to most ways in life, right? And this has to be said because there is this weak perception of the people that are in my generation, and I would like to be able to distinguish myself from them by saying that I'm not one of those people who just wants to blame something on somebody, right? With that being said, you must understand the times in which we're in. If we're actually looking at it from an objective point of view, most generations, if they were in this predicament, would probably be in this predicament, right? They would be facing these certain types of trials and tribulations, these moments of doubt, these moments of reflection. I think every generation within reason, if they were put in the same circumstance, they'd probably be feeling the same exact ways that I've been feeling. And let's hold on. Let me make this bigger. Let me make this bigger real quick. So with that being said, I feel like if you made certain sacrifices in your lifestyle, if you made certain sacrifices by not doing certain things, um, I feel like they would be much more graciously rewarded, right? So I feel like right now, and as I've been doing it for the last, let's just say, the better half of, let's just say, 5 years, right? 5 years, I've been dedicating myself to the constant improvement in my own life, in my own lifestyle, in my own character. And I feel like my sacrifices feel like they would have reaped more benefit in many different ways if I had did them 5 to 10 years before I had made that decision. And what I mean by that is this, right? I couldn't have been born 5 or 10 years ago. I couldn't have been. Obviously, you couldn't have been either, because if you could have been, then maybe you would have been, but you weren't, right? So with that being said, I make decisions now that 5 to 10 years ago, if I had made that decision, that could be completely life changing. That could be completely lifestyle changing. That could be the difference between me becoming a millionaire at, you know, let's just say early 30s versus me being a millionaire late 60s, right? If I had made the decisions that I've made the sacrifices that I've made, chose certain habits, avoided myself from certain things. And I feel like right now I've made certain decisions. I am clearly different than a lot of people that are my age. I move different. I think different things. I've been thinking different things. I've been researching and studying different things for a long time now. And now that would have given me a very, very clear and noticeable advantage. I feel like I'm not getting the advantage that I thought that I was putting myself in that position to be able to have. And that is very interesting. That is interesting reality to live within, because it's like, okay, I'm willing to make sacrifices and do things that almost every single person around me, older than me or younger than me, are not willing to do, not willing to make. And clearly, if just by me observing people who are a little bit older, if they were able to make those certain sacrifices, their life would be drastically better right now. Right, given a long enough period of time, if they made a certain decision at my age, they'd be in a completely different predicament. And I have now made the decisions that I've made. I've sacrificed the things that I've sacrificed. I have built the things that I've built. And I really believe that if I had did this and existed within this reality 5 to 10 years ago, and would have been, let's just say 30s right now, that I'd be in a much better predicament than I am right now. And I'd be at a much better advantage at this age if that was the case. So, amidst all the struggle, amidst all these things, I just think that's a very, very interesting reality to exist within. We are a weird generation because we are mature in certain regards, but we are also lacking in certain things that other generations would laugh at, that other generations would make fun of, because, well, here's the thing: when I was your age, I had this and this and this. I was doing this and this and this. And instead of acknowledging the struggle, instead of acknowledging the economic issue that does exist, that puts us at a complete disadvantage, because none of these things have gotten better, right? The financial situation hasn't really gotten better. The value the value of a dollar has only went down since I started working. Even though I've gotten paid more than my first job, I pretty much have damn near the same buying power, even though it's like legit. Like, I think I started getting, when I first had my first job, I think I was getting paid like $14 an hour, something like that. And I'm getting paid more than that now by a pretty decent percentage, right? For going based off of like, I'm getting paid probably like over 50% more than what I got paid before. And I pretty much have relatively the same buying power, because within that time that I acquired the money, it seemed the dollar also had lost its value. So it kind of is, we're in this weird predicament where if we work hard, we are not properly rewarded for working hard. And we're also in the predicament where we haven't really seen anybody benefit as much as they should have been benefiting from their hard work. So hard work's honestly a fluke. And in our generation, we also see a lot of people who don't work that hard, who are receiving plenty, right? Who have a lot more than what we have right now. And then it makes us question even more, well, why work hard? Not to say that I'm not a hardworking person. I think that's within my work ethic, because that's something that I built, something that I've developed, and something that I realized that's probably what I would need, as far as to have a little bit more grit to put me ahead of other people. Right? I understood these things from a very early age. But with that being said, to observe people who don't work as hard, in theory, get rewarded, that's a very interesting reality to exist within, because yes, we're existing within the same reality. At least that's what it would, appear to be. And I just think that's very, very interesting. It's something that I think a lot of people that are my age that could really relate to is that we could and we should have a lot more than what we actually have right now, right? We should be. I'm 24. Most people my age aren't thinking about family. They're not. But many generations before us, almost every single generation before us, this is about the time that you would start thinking about a family. You'd be clearly removed from high school. You would have, started your career, either graduated from college or whatever, and now you would start your life. And when starting your life, you're not thinking about children. You're not thinking about, you know, getting to the point where you're buying a house. Maybe you've already, moved out of your parents' house for a couple of years. And then like I said, and then this reality that does exist for most of the people that are my age, we are grown and we are mature and we are capable in a lot of ways, but also we are limited in a lot of ways that other generations clearly were not. And it's a very, very interesting time to live within. It's a very humbling time to live within, because here's the thing, like I mentioned earlier, right? Imagine being me. Imagine being able to sacrifice certain things that other people are not willing to sacrifice. Imagine trying your best, genuinely trying your best for the last, even before I graduated high school. Let's just say this was for about 7 years now. You did everything in your power, for the most part, when it comes to the mental model that is your life, when it comes to the physical being that you are, right? If you try to get ahead of the everybody else, you literally try to get ahead with everybody else, right? You made decisions, you made moves, you stopped doing certain things, like I keep reiterating, right? And you're not that far ahead of everybody else, you'd be like, well, what the fuck is the point? I've been willing to do things most people aren't willing to do, yet I don't see the result of the hard work, the sacrifice, you see what I'm saying? And then if you're, the people that are my generation, right? It would, it's in a weird way, you could do the bare minimum and still be ahead, or you could still be keeping up with the people who are willing to sacrifice more than you. To an extent, that's what I do believe. And obviously, when it comes to moving along with your life, I'm going to have certain character traits that other people around me are not going to have. I'm going to be better and more well equipped to handle certain situations in life than most people my age, right? And that, while that is true, and that is going to be my advantage in the long grand scheme of things, you would think I'd be much more ahead in a lot of different ways. Not that I'm not particularly ahead, but it's that they can almost catch up in some weird way. Even though realistically, like I said, if I had put myself in the position of 5 to 10 years ago, given my same advantages, given the same circumstances for other people doing their same certain things, they'd be way farther behind. And I think that's very, very interesting, because, like I said, it's almost like as if they can catch up, but in some ways they can't catch up, but in some ways they actually can catch up. And for anybody that's been willing to put themselves in a position where they're trying to get ahead, it's weird to not be ahead in certain ways, in certain positions, especially when that's all you've dedicated your life to, right? I've dedicated my life to self-improvement. I dedicated my life to trying to, to develop my character in certain ways. And of course, I understand very, very thoroughly that in the long grand scheme of things, by doing this, and you watching this, if you started your self-improvement journey, which hopefully you have, and you've made, considerable amount of progress, that's going to give you the advantage in the character aspect. But if you're not making a certain amount of money, it almost is for nothing. And that's the very, very hard reality that I'm learning right now, is if it didn't translate to money, there's people that are probably making a lot more money than me, but I'm so ahead of them physically, mentally, spiritually, and yet they're willing to get, they're actually able to still compete just because they are caught up. Well, I'll say, I don't even know if caught up. Let's just say advanced in the financial realm, right? I think that's very, very interesting. So, while I understand these things are going to give me an advantage, I also understand that it's a disadvantage to be in my position because of the things that I mentioned, right? You would think that I'd be ahead in a lot of ways. And I am ahead in a lot of ways, but I'm not as far ahead as I would be if I was just a few years younger. or a few, not a few years younger, a few years older, if I had made these decisions and, my life had panned out a little bit more, then maybe I'd be in a different predicament. And like I said, that discrepancy would be very, very much increased, very, very much visibly seen. So, if you're a person watching this, you've started your development journey, and you're not seeing as much results, just know that it's not that uncommon of a feeling. And a lot of people are feeling that specific way, and that's why a lot of people give up. That's why a lot of people quit, is because they don't see the result. And if you're a person that's already behind watching this, and you're thinking about making improvements and doing these things, of course, it's still worth it. But if you're a person that's also lacking, you still have time, which that could be very, very much, encouraging, but also it depends on who you are and depends on how much progress you've made in other areas of life where it can be very discouraging. But in the same breath, what the hell else are you going to do? Are you going to just be lame like everybody else? Or are you going to continue to be different from everybody else? For me, the answer is very, very simple. I'm going to continue to double down, triple down on the things that I know to be very, very good for me. To constantly keep making sacrifices for the things that I know I can live without, that aren't going to be serving the life that I would like to live. And hopefully, that'll be worth my time. That'll be worth the sacrifice. And maybe not. Maybe it is, but maybe not. But I'm willing to live knowing that I did as much as I've done, and will continue to do, given my current trajectory, than to have done nothing and live in the what if, what could have happened, right? If I had made that decision, what could have happened? So, like I said, I'm not saying to discourage you in any way, because I believe that even though these things are believed to be and clearly seen as, disadvantages, it doesn't mean that you should give up. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't still do the things that you know to be right and to be good. But you must double down even further and live with the result. And that's what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to double down on the things that I know that are good, and willing to live with the result given the current circumstances that we're living in, with the disadvantages of everything looking like, it can't really get that much better, because it fucking hasn't since we graduated high school. Ever since I graduated high school, which even really that wasn't a graduation. And I'm not here to be, play victim and, a pity party. I'm not trying to throw a pity party, but I'm giving you the realistic fucking view of what happened. So, yeah, I'm a part of the 2020 graduating class, which didn't really graduate. At least I can speak on my, the people that I went to high school with that graduated that same year. I didn't really graduate, or we didn't really graduate. So imagine that you go from that, pretty much forced into the real world. COVID happens. A lot of people, they were already far behind. Now they get more far behind, at least especially in the social realm, social aspect of it. They get more behind. They get easily distracted. It's much more easy and comfortable to stay inside, to do, nothing. Watch shows, play video games, you know, beat your meat. All these things, right? You get so caught up in all these things, and now you're, COVID and everything, you realize that was a complete fucking sham, right? In my generation specifically, you understand that you're in a position where you're getting fucked pretty much every single way that you possibly can be getting fucked. Doesn't seem like anything's really going to get better. Nothing has gotten better since you've got out of high school, since you've been thrust into the workforce. And then here's the thing: the only thing that could be worse in this position is for me to be in college and graduated, and then not being able to find a job. That would probably be the biggest disadvantage that could exist for me. Is if I had graduated, which I probably would have graduated a couple years ago, and still been working a similar job to what I'm working right now. That would be the only thing that could be, if I could give you a worse life for a person in my generation. So if you're a person in my generation, you went to college, you got your degree or whatever, and you're still working similar jobs to what I'm working, you're still getting paid, okay-ish money, that would fucking suck. If you're not automatically, if you don't go to college, if you went to college and you're not automatically making at least 80 to almost 100,000 a year off of the rip, you are fucking holding an L, 100%. So, like I said, that's just personally my perspective, but I'm gonna see if anybody has anything to say in the chat. Let's see. But yeah, I just think that shit's so fucking crazy, dog. Whoa, what the fuck? What the fuck? I'm just gonna check on YouTube, fuck it. But yeah, hopefully you understand what I'm saying, and like I said, I'm not here to throw a pity party, but I'm just here to give you some perspective. Hopefully, give you some if you're a person that's going through the same thing. Hopefully, I can give you some relatability, and if you're an older person, you're probably not gonna understand as well. But yeah, fuck it. At least I tried. Shit. Let's see what we got. Tapped in. Is this on Streamlabs? It's not on Streamlabs. Streamlabs is still a bitch. So I don't know what the fuck's going on. So here's what happened. Let me give you some rundown if you're still watching, Anthony, or anybody else that's watching. So for the better half of 4 years that I've been doing this podcast, I've been going live on Streamlabs pretty much for the most part. Right? I think in October, September, October, somewhere around there. I had maybe even a little bit before that. Maybe August. Either August or September of last year, I had ran into a problem that I have never encountered before. And it made me reevaluate and figure out things that I didn't even know I needed to figure out, trying to work around a certain problem. I found out that I needed to upgrade my camera's fucking firmware. Never knew of that. And I didn't know that I was on the first version of this audio board, that I needed to upgrade the firmware. Did that. There was an issue that was coming up on Streamlabs, so I couldn't figure out what the fuck it was. So I was doing whatever I thought potentially could be the actual solution to that. I made sure my Mac was up to date. Turns out it was Streamlabs all along. People who had a Mac and Streamlabs were experiencing the same damn issue. I reached out to Streamlabs. They reached out to me. The answer weren't really clear and concise as much as they could have been, so I waited for an update. Took a few months to get the update, and got the update. Tried to go live, and when I go live, I'm going to give them one more chance. I'm going to delete the shit. I'll delete the shit on the stream. I'm going to give them one more chance, because here's the thing. They've been trying to take the money out of my account for the premium version, because, my shit renews every year in January. So I'm going to see if I can delete this. Okay, how the fuck do I delete it? Whatever. Okay, so essentially I tried to go live. I go live, I can't see the chat, and I can't even see myself. Usually when I go live, I can see my camera. I could see what everybody else sees. So, couldn't see the chat, couldn't see the camera, and there was still the same fucking issue that I waited to be resolved. That should have been a software update that I had gotten, which I had already received from Streamlabs. I remember them sending me an email with a potential solution. And they're like, get back to us if you still run into the same issue. But I was like, fuck that. I'm not going to, I still have shit that I got to do. I still want to go ahead and go live and shit. And that was part of the reason why I took a long ass break last year, towards the end of last year. And I've been going live on OBS, which is the basic way you can go live. So I'm live on there right now. I haven't had an issue since. So that's how I knew that it was a Streamlabs issue, because I went live on here and it was fucking perfectly fine. Now, I did tweak a few things that I knew I needed to tweak eventually, which was, certain audio issues and shit like that I needed to address, certain camera delays and shit. So I addressed them. Still an issue. What the fuck? What the fuck? So that's unfortunate, but, it is what it is. You move on. You wait for an update, shit doesn't work. What the fuck? But I wanna kind of touch on this note, and this is kind of, I'm gonna try to extrapolate this to be something bigger than myself, because I don't want to just be on here talking about myself. There's much more good conversation that I can have if I talk about more than just myself, which I would like to get into. I was reflecting upon, how do I want to start this? I was reflecting upon what I'm after. Asking myself the questions that, most people are really, really uncomfortable asking. As I do very, very often, come to a conclusion that most people can't come to because most people don't ask the question. Most people don't like the uncomfortable feeling that comes from feeling that you're inferior to what you could be. And that's why they run away to doing the most basic shit of destructive habits, indulging in vices and all that shit. So what it comes down to it is this, right? I want to be a man, and I strive to be this, and I pride myself on being this, and it is what I believe to be one of the biggest sources of judgment. I really pride myself on being a man of character, and constantly revising what that looks like, and constantly trying to, you know, realistically attain. I'm not perfect, nor will I ever be or claim to be perfect, but I have a certain standard for myself where, if I'm misstepping, I truly feel the guilt, and I don't necessarily think that's a common feeling. I don't. I don't believe that. I feel like people think they can get away with shit. I feel like people feel like they can get away with lying. I feel like people can really feel like they get away with not being all that they can be. They really do believe this. They never have these conversations that I'm having with myself as I'm having them right now. I really pride myself on being a man of character, being a man of understood morals and understood value, and try my best, my absolute best, to not compromise these things. Because if I compromise these things, unlike most people that do exist, I will feel a certain remorse. I will feel a certain guilt that is overwhelming, that will destroy my mood. And I had made a podcast recently about selling your soul. Selling your soul, essentially, the concept being where you're willing to compromise yourself for financial gain or for whatever gain you believe to be. And obviously, that's going to be less than ideal. I would rather, and I said this on that same podcast, I would rather have less and feel better within my own psyche, within my own character, within my own, value hierarchy, than to have a lot, but to feel that guilt of knowing that I sold my soul. I sold myself short. I compromised on my values. So I'm willing to take less and receive less financially or whatever the fuck, as long as I'm being very, very thorough and understood with my own self, right? With my own character. And I want to be a man who tells the truth. I'm reading this note. I want to be a man who does what he wants to do, in the best possible way, with acknowledging my potential, with acknowledging my interest, who's actively building towards that, obviously, who's family oriented. And, realistically, if you're doing these things or, have these, same ambitions, what the fuck else could you be doing it for? You're doing it for your family. I feel like if you're wired correctly, I feel like you start to think about more than yourself. I feel like one of the very, very big misinterpretations that people have of my character at times when they don't know me as well is they think that I could be very much almost self-absorbed in certain ways, or let's just say arrogant or whatever. A lot of these bullshit ass terms I don't really believe in. Um, you get to this weird point where, if you're selfish, it's one thing. You get to the point where, you transcend that, hopefully. You transcend that and you start to think bigger than yourself. And then when you start to think bigger than yourself, in some weird way, it kind of ends up in that same sense of where you need to be selfish, because now you're doing the things, you know what you're doing, and you know why you're doing it, and it has to start with you. And if you ain't got your ducks in a row, if you're not doing or pursuing what you need to pursue, then everybody else takes damage, whether they know it or not, because of you not being and living up to your potential, right? So, in a weird way, it comes back down to that specific thing, right? You need to understand that you need to be doing it for more than yourself, because if you're just living selfishly, then you're just an asshole. You're a piece of shit, truly. And I got to the point where I understood that I know what I'm doing it for. I know what I need to be doing, and I know the cost of not doing for others around me. And you come back down to this conclusion of, okay, well, in order to be the best for everybody else, I need to be the best for myself, and in order to be the best for myself, I need to be a little bit selfish, and I need to be able to make certain decisions and do certain things that other people are not going to understand, that they might perceive to be a certain way, but if they understood my character, if they understood what I'm actually doing it for, then they would know that I have potentially their best interest in mind by trying to be the best me that I possibly can be. And with that being said, if you're, working towards anything, hopefully you have a bigger why than just yourself. Because if you're just, like I said, if you're living selfishly for yourself, why not fucking indulge within vices? Why not have as much sex as you possibly can have? Why not do drugs or smoke or drink whenever the hell you want? Why not? You have nothing to lose. You're trying to gain for everything for yourself. But you start to understand the opportunity cost of all your actions when you begin to have that judgment. Because here's the thing, if I'm ruining myself, or if I'm not being all that I could, then I'm not being all I could for everybody else. And if I'm not being all I could for everybody else suffers whether they know it or not. You come to those conclusions, right? Hopefully you understand. I'm looping, but hopefully you understand why I think the things that I think. But I'll get where I'm at. And I want to feel like I really, really do and have earned all the things that I have in this life. Right? I'm continuing on this note. I want to see where this takes me because I've said this before. A lot of the notes that I take in dictation. Right? I speak to my phone, and hopefully, it catches my, you know, the things that I said exactly how I wanted them to be encapsulated, and of course, hopefully, it takes upon my it takes my words with nuance in some type of weird way. Hopefully, I can decode it later. What did I write? I was referring to creating a vision for myself as far as what type of life I would like to live. Hold up. And fuck, where the fuck was I at? Fuck, where the fuck is that? Okay, that's a vision that I have. Okay, essentially, what I'm trying to say is this, right? I'm trying to get back into it, trying to get back into that state of mind. Essentially, I want to work for all the things that I know I'm deserving of. And if you are able to be in a position where you feel you've earned a lot more than what you're deserving of, that's going to be a weird predicament. And like I said about earlier in this live, it'd be weird to be in a predicament where you feel like you've been doing a lot and not getting as much in return. It's a weird, very, very weird predicament to be in. And like I said, especially with, I don't gotta repeat it again, if, like I said, if this shit happened 5 to 10 years ago, then you'd be in a golden position, but it's whatever, right? And I was talking about how I've curated the vision as far as what I would like my life to be, right? The importance of doing that is obvious, right? If you don't really have a vision for your life, exactly how you would like it to go, and you aren't pursuing that, well, first, if you don't have a vision, then you're not pursuing anything. And if you're not pursuing anything, that's an issue because then time's going to be wasted. If time's wasted, that's obviously not a good thing. And if you don't have a vision, then you can't improve upon that vision. Right? If the vision's blurry, then you can't make that vision become a lot more clear. And if your vision's not clear, you're not pursuing what you need to pursue, again, you're wasting time. And if you're wasting time, then you're fucking cooked, right? More time goes by. Eventually you're going to have to face that you are not all that you could be, and you are not striving to be all that you could be. And that's very harsh. That's harsh on the psyche. So most people block it out by vices and all that shit, like I said earlier. But essentially, what I was trying to get to was, as I've gotten better at creating this vision because I had first envisioned my life to be a certain way, I've gotten a lot more clear with what that will look like. And It puts into perspective of why you sacrifice what you sacrifice, why you're suffering, and what it's leading to. And essentially, it's going to cost a lot more than, and what this is what I've realized, it's going to cost a lot more than what I anticipated it's going to cost. It's going to be a lot more and a lot harder to attain than what I thought it was actually going to be. And obviously, hopefully, you're more than willing to pay to be able to figure it out. Um, and then what I came to the conclusion of is essentially it is going to be it's much easier to attain what I want. And this is something that I think is very, very interesting. And like I said, if you're a person that's, clarified your morals and values and things like that, hope this is something that you'll run into. You'll run into the fact that it's a lot easier to attain what you want if you're willing to compromise on something that you had said that you originally wanted. You sacrifice your family time. I mentioned earlier that I want to be I'm family oriented, right? That's what I strive to be. I have a daughter, I have a girlfriend who will soon be a wife, and you know, I don't want to sacrifice that because I believe that I should be able to attain the lifestyle that I want while also being a good family man. I believe that. But it's much easier to attain what I want in the grand scheme of have everything else if I just sacrifice that one thing. Or if I sacrificed my values, right? Sold myself out, you know, for the financial benefit, right? It'd be much easier to, attain that specific thing if I sacrifice my family life, if I compromise my own morals and values, even if I compromise my interest and dedicated myself to a lucrative habit or, um, you know, things that are going to be less moral, but make a lot of money, right? But it would in some weird way, it would get me closer to not having everything that I wanted, but to have some of what I want, maybe even some of what I don't have right now. But it would take a certain compromise that maybe I'm not willing to pay. And, you know, essentially, another thing I don't want to sacrifice is my pursuit of fulfillment. I don't want to have all these things and to still not be, in theory, either pursuing fulfillment or as fulfilled as I know I could be. That would also be hell. And the thing about it, and this is where you come to the conclusion that everything is for the character that you build, because that's who you are and that's who you will be and that's who you will sit with at the end of the day. If I gave you everything that you ever wanted ever right now, but yet you weren't satisfied with who you are and what you've became, then you're still going to feel empty inside. You still won't feel happy. And that's why a lot of people that have money or they have all the conventional things that everybody says that they want, maybe they got it too fast. Maybe they got it because they sacrificed something that they didn't want to sacrifice. And that's why they feel empty. Maybe they feel like there was more on the table. Maybe they feel like they're on this forever loop of trying to, attain something that is unattainable. Right? For me, looking back and, having, 2020 vision after the fact, I realized thoroughly that I've had everything that I wanted to have in this life already a couple years ago, but I wasn't satisfied with the character or the development of who I was at that specific moment. Even if I had everything that I could have wanted, I wouldn't have been ready for that. Simply, I wouldn't have been ready. Yes, it's what I want, but it didn't happen in the timeline that I needed for my character to catch up. And that is I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. For you to have everything that you want, but to not be the person that feels deserving of everything that they have. That's fucked, right? And that is what I'm trying to avoid. Understanding that if I compromise these things, it would make it easier for me to attain these things. But what I'm after is something that you really can't tangibly get. It's a thing. It's a thing that you feel, and it's not really masculine to say that. And I realize that, but in the same breath, you know, if you go about it a masculine way, it can revert from being feminine or vulnerable. I'm not gonna say feminine. Let's just say vulnerable to a little bit more masculine. So, um, What else did I have? I think it would be easier, but that's not what I want with it's not what I really want. It's not why I want it, and that's not who I am or what I meant to have. I believe that so it's without yeah, I don't want to attain what I want without with sacrificing what's worth sacrificing for, if that makes any sense. That's it sounds kind of contradictory, but it's gonna make it harder to attain the things that I want, but it's gonna be at least worthwhile. And when I do attain that, when I'm sitting there by myself, I want to feel worthy, and I think that's what it is, right? There's certain things that we want in this life. You want to feel worthy, you want to feel loved, right? You want to feel like you have purpose. You want to feel like you're seeking fulfillment in this life. And if you're able to attain the things that everybody really wants, or maybe what you want, but you don't feel that positive reinforcement that you're actually striving for, it's almost worth nothing. It's almost as if you sacrifice for nothing. It's almost as if you work so hard for nothing. So essentially, I know this is kind of rambling on, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying, man. So this life isn't easy, man. To attain what you want isn't easy. There's been plenty of setbacks that have been put in place to help you not get to where you want to go, to hold you back. Your response is going to literally be everything, and we'll see where you will be in a few years. Maybe you'll be in a worse position. Maybe you would have compromised yourself. Maybe you have chose to sell yourself out and to live a life of, you know, they say, I've heard people say this. I'm gonna butcher the fuck out of it, but I want to say it anyways. Would they say either up your standards for the life that you would want, or lower your desire for what you actually want? That's butchered as fuck, but essentially, what it means, in my opinion, at least in my perspective, is either you're willing to make the sacrifices for what you actually want, or you need to lower your desire for what you say that you want. Right? Me, I'm not willing to compromise. I know what the fuck I want. I know what I'm sacrificing for. I'm not taking anything less than what the fuck I had set out for. That's for damn sure. So when it comes to you, hopefully you can say the same thing. And like I said, in a couple of years we'll meet up again. Maybe we'll have another conversation like this. Hopefully, and hopefully you'll be in a position where maybe you're not in this predicament right now. Where, and I'm kind of speaking to myself, and I'm speaking to y'all as well, man. Like whether you're here right now with me, or whether you'll get there in a few years from now, or whether you get there in a few months from now, I believe that most of us, if we're being honest with ourselves, will be in this position. So hopefully, in a couple of years' time, you're closer to what that looks like. You're closer to the things in which you want, and hopefully you didn't sell yourself out, because that would fucking suck. It would be for nothing. So it's interesting when people get caught up in the comparison game, where they're comparing their lives to someone else's. Just know that it's that if you ever heard J. Cole's song "Love Yours," it's that same sentiment, right? You'll never be able to have what anybody else has. You will only be able to have what you have. You must be okay and content in some weird way, even though I don't really preach contentment like that, but in some weird way you must be content and happy and satisfied and fulfilled and find meaning with what you have. And if you don't, then you never will. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to find the silver lining in the disadvantage. I'm trying to find the beauty in the struggle. I'm trying to find solace in the discomforting reality that does exist for my generation. It's not easy. It's very, very hard. And this is why I think a lot more people will, they'll probably, revert to, whether that's physically, ending it for themselves, or whether that's, mentally ending it for themselves, as far as, giving up on their dreams, giving up on these things, because it's much easier for you to just cop the fuck out. It's much easier for you to quit. But for the ones that don't, it's gonna be one hell of a fucking way up to where you're trying to go. That's for damn sure. And that's something that I realized is, yeah, I'm striving to be and to do more, but in the same breath, right, it's all gonna come back down to how I feel in the end. Right? If I put out work, and I would hate for this to happen, if I put out work and I know it's not my best work yet, it gets a lot of recognition, that's a curse. If I'm constantly putting out my best work and I feel like I'm not getting any recognition, that's a curse. So here I am right now. Hopefully, maybe you understand a little bit more about the things in which I think about after this episode. Podcast is going to be on Thursday, but I'm going to go ahead and end it off. I feel like you can fill in the blank. But if you're going through something like this, very, very similar, if I've hinted at something, please leave it in the comments. And just being raw and authentic, man. I know I was kind of everywhere today, but hopefully you stood with me. And if you did, hopefully you learned something. Hopefully I give you something to think about at the very least. I'll check the comments one last time, then I'll go ahead and end it off. But if I did say anything that really resonated with you, please leave it in the comments. I would love to have a conversation with you. These things aren't easy, and I know this for damn sure. But even though they're not easy, hopefully it's worthwhile and meaningful. I read the comments and then I end it. Yeah, I'm still here. There's a lot of famous people that need to hear this message. Too many people sacrificing their life for success. I agree, Anthony. It's like, in many ways, we all do things for the recognition of others. What matters is who you're trying to get there from and how. Imagine being in your bags for so long, you say that you can say just rambling. Love Yours is still top 5 J. Cole song for sure, for sure. I think being content means to appreciate and recognize where you are and what you have right now, even though you will have more later on. It gets confusing and settling. Yeah, and 100%. I agree. I agree with that. It's a weird predicament because, especially with hearing so many things, and this is why it's hard for most people to really, silence the noise. And I'll keep going. I keep going, but it's hard for people to silence the noise. It gets very, very hard to not hear or to not judge yourself based off of somebody else or what somebody else said and shit like that. You hear, two sides of the same coin, and sometimes it works for you and sometimes it doesn't work for you. You hear, you need to be completely, thankful and grateful. Obviously, I think that's the ideal. Those are the ideals. At least that's what they say for what you are and what you have, and you need to be grateful, thankful, all that shit. But in some regard, you need to also be, feeling like you're less than, because that's how you actually move the needle. You need to feel like, you don't want to, you want to be comfortable, but then you realize comfort's an enemy. But you do everything to try to be a little bit more comfortable, but you realize that's actually not a virtue. You see what I'm saying? So there's just so many things that in some weird way they do contradict. You do want both. Actually, you do want both. And some of it is a living and breathing contradiction, but in the same breath, then you'll hear this as well. It's all about balance. What the fuck is balance? Balance doesn't exist. That's something that I realized not too long ago as well. I was writing a note and I was thinking about all the things that I need to prioritize and thinking about the things that I've been neglecting, right? And I know I'm kind of extending this way longer and I'm giving you my fucking whole life story pretty much, but I was thinking about the things that I know I need to, spend more time with, be a little bit more focused on. And what the conclusion that I came to is I can't do everything. And everything is meant to be imbalanced. And there's no such thing as balance. There's no such thing as perfect. There's no such thing as doing everything and being everything that I know I need to be and doing everything that I know I can do. There's no such thing as that. And like I said, some people have that perspective and say, well, what the fuck's the point of even doing it at all? And some people say, I'm going to keep giving it my best shot. And that's where the fuck I am. Is I'm going to keep doing and being all that I can, even though I know that it's probably never going to be enough. But then you ask yourself, what the fuck are you doing it for at all? If you know it's never going to be enough, what are you doing it for? And that's a good question. Hopefully you have an answer. And if you don't have an answer now, no matter how confusing it may seem, hopefully you'll find that answer. For me, I'm looking for it. That's for damn sure. Y'all have a good night. Tapping on Thursday. And more good conversations on the way, man. Y'all have a good night. Like I said, tap in Thursday. Thank you for your time and attention if you did stay. Hopefully you learned something. Y'all have a good night.